The phenomenon of juvenile offenders sentenced to long prison terms for serious crimes has long been a subject of societal debate and legal contention. Among these individuals are juvenile killers, individuals who committed heinous acts while still adolescents and are now serving sentences in correctional facilities. Why and how did they end up in prison? Let's find out. Here are the top 10 kids who are currently rotting in jail. Roxana Sikorsky, a 17-year-old girl in Detroit, Michigan, cried in court on Monday as she was sentenced to 10 to 20 years behind bars for conspiring to kill her entire family with her adult boyfriend. Roxana Sikorsky was just 15 years old in October 2014 when she woke up in the middle of the night and sliced her little brother's throat in a failed attempt to off her parents and two siblings. Before the judge read her sentence on Monday, Sikorsky's mother addressed the court and pleaded for mercy for her adopted daughter. She's in desperate need of continued psychological help, Laureen Sikorsky said. She is still fragile, and an adult prison would shatter her delicate world. How will sentencing her as an adult help her? Her adopted father Jeffrey added that he was disgusted with how the trial unfolded and that he worries with how she will fare in prison. She's vulnerable. She's young, Mr. Sikorsky said. Roxana was 4 years old when the Sikorskys adopted her and her two siblings from Poland. Due to abuse she suffered in early childhood, Roxana was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, a mental illness where children are unable to form an emotional attachment with their primary caregivers. The teen appeared genuinely sorry in court as she apologized to her parents for not being the daughter they wished I would be. "I promise that I will get better, no matter what happens," Roxana said through tears. Despite the protestations of her parents, the judge nonetheless sentenced Roxana to 10 to 20 years behind bars. Meanwhile, the boyfriend who encouraged Roxana to kill her whole family is serving a life sentence for the crime, after being found guilty on all 7 counts. Antonio Barbo, one of 2 teenagers accused of killing an elderly Sheboygan Falls woman. Barbo and Nathan Pop are charged with first-degree intentional homicide for allegedly bludgeoning to death 78-year-old Barbara Olson, Barbo's great-grandmother, at her Sheboygan Falls home in September 2012 with a hammer and hatchet. In an unexpected turn of events, Barbo pleaded no contest to first-degree intentional homicide, which means he accepted the conviction but did not admit guilt, changing his plea from not guilty by reason of mental sickness. A psychiatrist has testified Barbo has cognitive issues stemming from him being struck by a car when he was 10, possibly affecting his behavior. "I know I don't show my emotions. I myself am not sure why, but that doesn't mean I don't. I took away someone's mother, grandma, sister, friend. I had no right to do so. Because of this one action I decided to take, I've ruined so many lives," Barbo said. The judge sentenced Antonio Barbo to life in prison for death of great-grandmother. Barbo will be eligible for parole in 2048, when then the 14-year-old is 50. As the courtroom collectively absorbed the sentence's weight, the heaviness of those words lingered in the air. Eric Smith. Eric Smith, born January 22, 1980, is an American murderer who, at the age of 13, tortured and murdered 4-year-old Derek Joseph Roby in Steuben County, New York. On August 2, 1993, when Smith was 13 years old, he was riding his bike to summer camp in a local park day camp. 4-year-old Derek Roby was walking alone to that same camp. Smith saw Roby and lured him into a nearby wooded area. The nature and brutality of the crime shook the local community to its core and sparked outrage and disbelief. Following the discovery of Derek's lifeless body, a massive manhunt ensued. Eric Smith, with his distinctive red hair and glasses, became the prime suspect. He was apprehended shortly after and quickly confessed to the crime. Smith was tried as an adult, making him the youngest murder defendant tried as an adult in New York State history. He was subjected to extensive medical testing from specialists on both sides. They examined brain function, hormone levels, and found nothing to explain his violent behavior. According to court documents, Smith was a loner who was often tormented by bullies for his protruding low-set ears, thick glasses, red hair, and freckles. On August 16, 1994, Smith was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to the maximum term then available for juvenile murderers, a minimum of 9 years to life in prison. Smith was denied parole 10 times from 2002 to January 2020. In October 2021, Smith was granted parole after 27 years of incarceration. He was ultimately released from prison on February 1, 2022. Craig Price. Craig Price, born October 11, 1973, is an American serial killer who committed his crimes in Warwick, Rhode Island between the ages of 13 and 15. He was arrested in 1989 for 4 murders committed in his neighborhood, a woman and her 2 daughters that year, and the murder of another woman 2 years earlier. Price committed his first murder at the age of 13 in Warwick, Rhode Island on the night of July 27, 1987. Price broke into a home that was only 2 houses away from his own, took a knife from the kitchen, and stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 58 times, killing her. A little over 2 years later, Price was a 15-year-old freshman in high school when he murdered 3 other neighbors on September 1, 1989. Price, high on marijuana and LSD, stabbed 39-year-old Joan Heaton 57 times, her 10-year-old daughter Jennifer, who witnessed Price stabbing her mother to death in the kitchen, 62 times, and crushed the skull of Heaton's 7-year-old daughter Melissa, who also witnessed Price stabbing her mother and sister and inflicted 30 stab wounds. The stabbings were so brutal that the handles broke off the knives he used, with the blades staying inside the bodies of the victims. Price calmly confessed to his crimes after he was discovered. He was arrested a month before his 16th birthday and was tried and convicted as a minor. By law, this meant that he would be released and his criminal record sealed when he turned 21. Price himself claimed racism by white people beginning when he was a young child was a factor, and that the first time he wanted someone to die was when a group of white adults allegedly shouted racial slurs at him and tried to run him over with their car when he was a young boy. During his incarceration, Price has been charged with additional crimes, including stabbing a correctional officer and fellow inmate. He was sentenced to an additional 10 to 25 years. James Fairweather. On March 29, 2014, 33-year-old James Atfield, who had a brain injury, was stabbed to death in Colchester, Essex. Atfield was a father of 5 who had suffered brain damage after a car accident. The violence committed towards him with over 100 stab wounds startled the police. 3 months later, on June 17, Nahid Almania, a 31-year-old Saudi student of the University of Essex, was also stabbed and killed. Fairweather stabbed her in the abdomen before forcing the knife into her eyes and ultimately her brain, so that she could not see evil. Essex police questioned 70 locals with a history of knife crime, including Fairweather, who gave an alibi and was not questioned further. Fairweather did not attempt another murder for over a year because the public were wary of the danger. On May 27, 2015, he was spotted loitering early in the morning by a concerned dog walker. The police were called and interviewed Fairweather, who was wearing rubber-gripped gloves and bearing a knife. He was arrested. In August 2015, he told a psychiatrist some of the most antisocial and violent thoughts the professional had heard, saying that voices were telling him to burn babies and maim prostitutes. James Fairweather was 15 years old when he committed his murders and 17 at his conviction. Fairweather was found unanimously guilty by the jury on April 22, 2016, and was to be sentenced a week later, with the judge saying that the minimum sentence would be 12 years. On April 29, 2016, Fairweather was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 27 years. Fairweather tried to appeal the sentence in September on the grounds of his age, but this was rejected as it was deemed that the judge was aware of both. Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper was born in Burbank, California, on December 18, 1948. Early on, he exhibited antisocial behavior such as cruelty to animals. At the age of 10, he buried a pet cat alive, then dug it up, decapitated it, and mounted its head on a spike. Kemper was known to harbor dark fantasies and have a morbid imagination. In his youth, Kemper performed rites with his younger sister's dolls that culminated in his removing their heads and hands. Kemper had a close relationship with his father and was notably devastated when his parents separated in 1957. He was sent to live with his mother Clarnell in Helena, Montana. Kemper had a severely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, a neurotic, domineering alcoholic who frequently belittled, humiliated, and abused him. At the age of 14, Kemper ran away from home in an attempt to reconcile with his father. Kemper stayed with his father for a short while until the elder Kemper sent him to live with his paternal grandparents. On August 27, 1964, at the age of 15, Kemper was sitting at the kitchen table with his grandmother when they had an argument. Enraged, Kemper stormed off and retrieved a rifle that his grandfather had given him for hunting. He then re-entered the kitchen and fatally shot her in the head before firing twice more into her back. When Kemper's grandfather returned from grocery shopping, Kemper went outside and fatally shot him in the driveway next to his car. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts. Initial testing measured his IQ at 136, over 2 standard deviations above average. On December 18, 1969, Kemper was released on parole from Atascadero. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper killed 8 people. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to isolated areas where he would shoot, stab, smother, or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home, where he decapitated them, performed irrematio on their severed heads, had sexual intercourse with their corpses, and then dismembered them. Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder on May 7, 1973. He asked for the death penalty, requesting death by torture. He instead received 7 years to life for each count. Bever brothers. On July 22, 2015, 5 members of the Bever family were murdered in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Daniel Bever, age 12, called 911, saving the lives of his sisters Autumn, age 2, and Crystal, age 13, by alerting authorities. Crystal, one of the 2 survivors, identified 2 of her older brothers, 18-year-old Robert and 16-year-old Michael, as the assailants. Robert confessed to committing the familicide. He claimed that he and his brother planned the act for some time and intended to commit a shooting spree outside the family, hoping it would rival and even outdo both the 1999 Columbine High School massacre and the 2012 Aurora, Colorado shooting. Robert also stated that he admired serial killers, hoped to strike in locations outside of Oklahoma, and wanted to achieve a body count of up to 500 people or more. Both of the brothers were eventually pleaded guilty to all counts and were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Philip Chisholm. On October 22, 2013, a 9th grader at Danvers High School in Massachusetts named Philip Chisholm did the unthinkable. At just 14, he brutalized his 24-year-old math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. The reportedly joyful Ritzer was known to go out of her way to help her students with math and had asked Chisholm to stay after school that fateful day in October. She did not know the plot Chisholm had put into motion days before. At the end of the school day, Philip Chisholm followed Ritzer into a school toilet. Wielding a box cutter, Chisholm robbed, raped, and killed her, then rolled her body in a garbage can to the woods behind the school. Chisholm then took himself into town and bought a movie ticket using Ritzer's credit card. When police caught him the following morning, Philip Chisholm had not washed his hands and still had Ritzer's blood all over them. Philip Chisholm was indicted for the murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery of Colleen Ritzer. He was tried as an adult, and on February 26, 2016, he was sentenced to serve at least 40 years in prison. T.J. Lane. On the morning of February 27, 2012, 6 students were shot at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, resulting in the deaths of 3 of them. Witnesses said that the shooter had a personal rivalry with one of his victims. 2 other wounded students were also hospitalized, one of whom sustained several serious injuries that have resulted in permanent paralysis. The 5th student suffered a minor injury, and the 6th a superficial wound. By the evening of February 27th, authorities confirmed that the suspect was Thomas Michael Lane, a 17-year-old male juvenile and former student of Chardon, who was a sophomore at Lake Academy Alternative School and used a bus in common with several victims. Lane used a .22 caliber handgun. He was soon arrested by police near his car parked outside the school. Lane was ultimately indicted on 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. Because of his age, he was detained as a juvenile pending a decision by the prosecution and court as to whether he would be tried as an adult. Surprisingly, Lane showed no regret for his conduct. He donned a blue button-down shirt to court, only to expose a disturbing message scribbled on a white t-shirt. That word not only described his actions, but also increased the trauma for the victim's family. He even laughed callously at the mother of one of his victims, as she bravely presented her story. Lane pleaded guilty to the charges for which he had been indicted. On March 19, 2013, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Petrie Cordy. A 13-year-old boy who killed a woman by stamping on her face has been given a life sentence. Petrie Cordy knocked Glynis Bensley, 47 years of age, to the ground before robbing her and stamping on her face with such force that his footprint was left on her cheek. She died later from a severe bleed in the brain after the attack outside the Seven Stars pub in Smethwick, West Midlands. Cordy was given a minimum tariff of 12 years, but will have to serve another 11 years and 4 months before he can be considered for parole due to time spent in custody awaiting trial. A second defendant, Zahaib Majid, 20 years of age, was jailed for 10 years for her manslaughter. The pair were also both found guilty of robbing Bensley of her money, phone, jewelry, and cigarettes before leaving her in the street. Detective Chief Inspector Sam Ridding, who led the investigation, said that it was clearly the joint intention of the pair to use violence on anyone they targeted. They were in it together, as the CCTV showed. They arrived within seconds of each other. Ms. Bensley was tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time and was randomly picked out by the pair, believing that she was a man and that she was wearing a gold bracelet.